AI is not building for AI.
Do you think AI can replace empathy?
Maybe I can say something that it absolutely could.
About 40 to 60% of all questions didn't have an answer in the knowledge base. And so the AI chatbot was not able to answer those questions.
All feedback is good intent.
How AI is making things easier on the building.
I learned this little trick from a very nice, well-known company called Amazon.
2 product minds, thousands of launches, billions in impact. From Apple Pay to Amazon, welcome to the Product Lab.
Hey everyone, my name is Jihad. Welcome to the Product Lab. We have incredible things to do with our co-host, Anish Bhatt, who is going to introduce himself. He helped create Apple Cash. So he's going to give us his intro, but just in a nutshell, what we're here talking about is for builder conversations by builders. And so the goal is like, how are we building today? What are we thinking about? What are the tools? What are the workflows? So I'm excited to get into it, Anish. How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling great, and I will give a quick introduction. My name's Anish. I'm the inventor of Apple Pay Cash. I'm part of Georgia Tech's 40 Under 40. And I've had a couple other exits along the way, both in startup and one with an IPO, which was at Square. So again, incredible time to build. Excited to be here because one, I love to learn. I love to learn from other builders, but I'd love to also share the way that I build today, the way I drive productivity, the way I have a deeper amount of empathy for my customers, the way that I design and build with my engineers. So excited to get into this. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, amazing. So intro for myself, why, it's worth even listening to me is that, I've been an engineering manager at Amazon for almost half a decade. Went out to build my IT consulting firm for SaaS startups, worked with 47 of them, all the way from idea MVP stage to Series A plus to scaling past, 3 to 6 million in ARR. So a lot of experience in the trenches, a lot of failures as well, learning moments in building. So happy just to get into it. And I think the first thing that comes to mind, Anish, is like, dude, it's an incredible time to be a builder right now. Like I think about us sitting between tech and product and tech and the business and being able to just have so many tools at our disposal. Like what are you seeing right now, like in your lived experience, using the tools? Are you excited?
I mean, first of all, absolutely excited. The time is very different. I think back to my days at Square when I used to find an area of the office to hide so I could write my PRDs and user stories and really try to think of every possible way that the product could go both right and wrong. Now I'm doing it at such an incredible pace. It's unbelievable. And you really pick the tools that there's so many great things out there. First of all, let me say that there's not one great product. There's several great AI products, both for writing, for designing, for coding. And so I really think it's important for you to engage with many of them, interact with them, and figure out which ones work best for you. So I found a few of mine that are my favorites, and I'm happy to share those on today's call, that I think you really figure out what's your team. And it's really not a team of folks. It's a team of AI tools that you work and you partner with, you invest in, and you're almost building a real relationship with them because they start to get to know who you are and how you build and what's the empathy that you're driving. So again, excited to share it. It's a wonderful time for building. If you're a builder, I mean, you couldn't be more excited.
I think about my days where, you go up to an engineer and you're like, yo, what's your tech stack? Are you MERN? Are you using React? Are you using this? And a lot of times, just the opinionated nature of like how well you understand your stack and where it applies well and where it doesn't is how you decide like, okay, this engineer is the right fit for the project. I think of a parallel to that where now for product people, it's like, what's your product stack? Right? What are you doing right now? And I love what you said with your tool set is that like, I don't think there is always going to be 100% right answer. It's just going to be like, what is the right combination configuration that creates the efficiencies, that creates the outcomes, that's well suited for the goal at hand. And so I'd love to get into that. I mean, like first, just to frame it a little bit more widely is to say like, what are you trying to do? Like, what is it that you're really trying to do in your position right now in like what you're trying to build? And then like working backwards into like how to use the tools to do it, right? And I'd love to like even share my product stack at a certain point. But I think what's cool to ask is that like, what are you doing right now for building? Like, what are you trying to achieve? And then how are you doing that?
Yeah, I think one, it's an incredible question. Let me get into it I think from first principles perspective. I think that could help. So I have a North Star in the ways that I work, primarily with my engineering product and design team, and then the relationship we have with the other departments. I think it's really important to kind of frame it in that way. So I'm a vice president of product at Jeeves, and we kind of have this approach. We have this goal of constantly having a really high velocity as well as a high bar, a high quality of features that we ship. And we try to ship on a weekly basis. So first, I really try to make sure that all feedback is good intent. So really, I try my best to just consume feedback. So what do I mean by feedback? It's feedback from customers directly. So we have NPS surveys that we're sending out. We also have conversations that we're having with our customers directly, whether it's with the sales team, whether it's with product, or whether it's with the customer support team. So a lot of feedback coming into us. Now, how do we actually collate that and make sure that there's something valuable? I actually have to bring it into one central place. So I have this one LLM that I've created, and I call it my customer feedback LLM. So I pull in all my NPS data. I pull in my customer support conversations. I pull in all my recorded sales meetings. I also pull in all my product and research sessions that I have. And when you pull it all together, you can really find patterns in areas that you have in your product. So that for me is my very first North Star. I don't really move off of that because one, I have to understand where the customers are having their dilemma. I feel that if I can really dig into the problem area and I can really understand the true empathy of the customer, I can build something far greater than what anyone else could. So I hope that for me, that's really where I have to start. Why is it possible today versus when it wasn't possible before? Well, before you would get your NPS survey results from one tool. You're using a separate tool for your sales feedback. You're using maybe another one for customer support. And then perhaps you're collecting all this product and research feedback from a different place. So you have all these mediums. Now, how do you actually bring them together and actually dig through this data in a way that is one, efficient and meaningful? So now with AI tools and frankly, with our own custom LLM that actually helps us bring all this together, we're able to find those patterns far faster and actually make a difference on that feedback. I remember back in the day that we would get this feedback and it would sometimes take weeks, maybe months before we actually agreed on what the feedback was. And then we started to build. Can you imagine that for that customer who shared that feedback months ago to only get a product or a feature only months and months later? Now we've actually shortened that cycle so much that someone could give us feedback. We could see if there's a density of that pattern happening in that part of the product, and then we can deliver something within a week.
I love that. I love starting from the customer back. And ultimately, like there's a great guy, Matt Lerner, who has this book called Growth Levers. And he has a whole consultancy about like growth and everything like that. And I love his perspective on it, which is like talking about customer journey and then identifying like what is the key bottleneck, right? What is the primary growth lever that unlocks everything else? And I think like what you just described is a huge one, which is ultimately like, it depends on the stage of the product, but like ultimately if you're having, millions of data points across all these transcripts and inputs and things like that, it becomes a question of how much data can you actually get in terms of awareness, and then how much of that data can you really like crunch and analyze. And if you can do that, that certainly makes up that direction that you're going to build anyways, making sure you're building the right thing. So I know you talked about it a little bit in that tech stack, right? Is it just a GPT? Are you feeling like, okay, did you ever feel the need to like do a different product? Like, has there been any issues trying to scale it as well, like in terms of the data being used? And then What are the outputs of it? What do you feed it to next? Resetting that question. I don't think I asked it in the best way.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't want it to sound like I don't want it to sound so complex, but I also don't want it to sound like, well, it's just that. Like,
yeah, I will, and I want to add some spice to it, right? Which is like
because I'm about
the
to share a Series A perspective. What I'm trying to say is like
yeah,
you're gonna launch something and you're gonna get feedback a lot of ways. And it's
yeah,
for the same product, but you're gonna get feedback in all the different ways. So like don't act on just one thing. Like make sure
yeah,
you've done a 360. That's basically what we legitimately I am doing that at
yeah,
work right now. When we launch
yeah,
something, we're getting it literally pours in like it's literally like a waterfall. It pours in from every
yeah,
direction. You can tell like where's the biggest pain point of the
yeah,
launch.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
a
yeah.
really dope like approach. I actually love it a
I know,
lot.
I hear you. Actually, I have a pretty specific example there too. So let me reset. Let me share a little bit of a specific example, and then like you know, as we're talking, we can just further go down that pipeline of building, right?
Why
Uh,
don't you share yours and then be like, what do you do? I think
yeah,
that's the best way. Because why don't you share your approach and then I'll be like, oh, that's amazing. Like,
yeah.
and then I'll ask you a question where you kind of go into yours a little bit more.
I love that perspective, Anish. And ultimately, being able to ingest that data is such a advantage. You know, being able to, the speed. Ultimately, like as I hear more and more, speed becomes a main sort of competitive advantage because if everyone has the same tools, everyone can, let's say, collect the same amount of data theoretically. Then it just matters how quickly can you act on it and deliver on that on behalf of your customers. And so you know, there's other dimensions there, but all things given the same, it's the how quickly you can move. Actually, to that matter, I've been working inside an ed tech company right now, and you know, they have a couple thousand daily active users, teachers, in fact, that come in and give a ton of feedback. And the main way they give that feedback through is through an AI chatbot. So basically, we have an integration with a tool called UserFlow, and UserFlow has where you can upload a bunch of like knowledge base and basically have the users, if they have any questions, they can ask it, and that becomes our first triage before they can escalate to customer service using intercom. Um, and basically, one of the big things and topics was like we need to reduce CS burden. Like the CS team is having to deal with so many different things in the product or dealing with users directly. How do we automate it? Well, the first thing I went in and looked at was like, let's check out what people are doing at the first level, at the first triage. And what we found out was crazy, which was that about 40 uh, to 60% of all questions didn't have an answer in the knowledge base. And so the AI chatbot was not able to answer those questions. And so, you know, we had over 1,000 questions that were about unanswered. And so the question became, right, not about, not just, okay, how do we reduce triaging, but specifically, how do we increase our knowledge base so that the AI can actually even answer that effectively? And then thinking about how that could reduce the CS burden downstream. But it gave us really cool insights too of like what are the issues that customers are having, and we realized because of some new features that got delivered on, some users did not know how to use it, and so they were asking the AI chatbot questions about it. So it's just really interesting about how having these different endpoints, interface points between the user can surface data that's like producing clarity, whereas before we were just guessing. So yeah, I totally understand in terms of what you're getting at there. I mean, what are your thoughts about that? And like, what do you see is like some of the worst offenders of you know, let's talk about Series A plus products that either are one, yeah, that are not able to make those types of decisions with customer feedback.
You shared something interesting that I was hoping you could teach me a bit more about. You launched something new and you've got this knowledge-based chatbot that customers can interact with. How often do you train or teach this knowledge-based chatbot? How do you go about making sure that it understands all of your latest features and that it is up to date?
That's a great question. I mean, so it is a gap that we had to address. And the way we addressed it was that we had a knowledge base. It was on Freshdesk. It's just a bunch of, you know, documentation that's available online. And we had a scraper, a crawler that would go through each of those pages and then use, get that data, put it in a vector database for the AI chatbot to then use. This is what user flow is doing, at least. And so our process became more of an operational excellence, whereas when now our engineers are deploying a new feature, they're actually and QA is doing the QA, they're actually creating a description of that feature. They're describing how to use it, they describe the context of it, they describe everything in that page, and they hit publish on that page of documentation the same time that they would deploy that feature. And so what you have is like a very tight coupling to ensure that whenever things are getting deployed, there is going to be some corresponding documentation that gets crawled by the chatbot and then is able to answer that question. So especially as feature velocity rapidly increases, I think users will certainly like feel a bit of whiplash. And so it's important to like keep them in the know. So that's basically it.
I learned this from your old bosses at your company, at one of your old companies. It's Amazon. It's the good old PRFAQ. Now, for those who are not familiar with the PRFAQ, it's a forward-looking document that you create that's actually based for external reading. So you almost write it like a full-on PR. And the FAQ portion is where you actually list what are going to be the frequently asked questions of this feature launch. So I used to not actually do this, but I'll tell you why it's so valuable now. When you're launching so fast, the PRFAQ serves as the source and the foundation of so many other documents and artifacts that I create. So when I have this PRFAQ, I then create my marketing materials with my marketing team. I then have my sales team, so I create sales materials for them. I have my CS, my customer support team. So then I create materials with them, which is the knowledge base articles, and it improves our chatbot that is interacting with our customers. And then even with the PRFAQ, I actually help to write my PRD or my tickets, frankly, that I actually just work with and interact. And then finally, actually, as a bonus, I even use it to do my design work and my prototype. So that PRFAQ is actually quite foundational, because if you're shipping as fast as we are, then you do need to consistently update other members of your teams, sales, marketing, and customer support being the three most important. Because if they're not up to date or they don't know what's shipping, they're always going to be behind the ball. They're going to be reactive. And it makes their life just much, much harder. And it breaks that trust and the camaraderie that the product team is trying to build with these customer-facing teams. So I actually leverage and use that PRFAQ more now than I ever have, because with us going just so fast, we have to make sure that we have that trust with those internal teams. And this is how I do it.
I love that. And I have written several PRFAQs myself. So I love that you mentioned it. It was actually out of all the documentation that I've written, that was probably one of my more favorite ones, because like just thinking and sitting with it emotionally, even like of how you would feel when you announce a feature and what other people would feel and what they would ask. And I think it just really fine tunes our product brain or whatever you're building to think about that end in mind, think about what would people feel and want and desire. So, I mean, just to like kind of even put in a frame on a much leaner team, because like, you might not have like a whole sales, marketing, CS team in separate areas. It might be even a leaner team kind of right across sitting from each other. But I think the same thing applies, which is having everyone sit in that space, in that emotional space of being like, what would the user feel about this? And it's such a simple question, and I feel like it's oriented me in the most incredible ways in product decision making. Is like actually two questions. One is like, what is a person really trying to do, and what are they feeling? And those two questions, you could frame it even between like, what are you really trying to do, and what are you really feeling? But the question is so, I think, accurate in orienting the right feature building and the right communications, is because you're literally like thinking about what the feature will be used for. You're thinking about, the user is not just coming into this earth and being like, yes, I want this feature. They're doing something. They're doing something even in your product. And like now the question becomes, what were they trying to do, and now what can they do because of this? And then to even ask the question of what are they feeling is to even more sit with that idea of like, what was the context of their life, right? In not just our imagination, right? But what in their lived reality. So to that point, right? Actually, leaner teams I've seen even use like, and what I've used is actually I create personas in like a chatbot, right? And train a GPT for it, and basically start like asking them questions about their life and like how they're feeling, what they're doing, what would they be trying to do, and injecting their workflow. And that ends up being like a simulation for me about like different scenarios and different edge cases, particularly. And when I even present these personas in the context of sales and marketing, they also can ask these edge cases as well. And sometimes it's a founder doing sales, marketing, and product, right? And it's the idea that like, thinking and sitting in that emotional space is so underrated. And I feel like to some degree, people just have good intuitions about it. Like the really great product people, really great founders have just a really great intuition. But when you decompose that intuition, I think it's just being able to really feel what your users are feeling.
Love
Did
that.
you have those moments when you're building? Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have had the moments that you're sharing. And, I'll say this as the two most exciting parts of building. I have always had the freedom to empathize. I've always had the freedom and liberty to learn and empathize with my customer, really dig into that persona, understand their pain points, not just the symptoms of the problem, but really the root cause of what's creating that difficulty for them. What I haven't always had is the liberty to ship. Now I have this incredible liberty to ship. I have this liberty to deliver on that promise time and time again. I can deliver something. I can put it in their hands. I can see the reaction. I can see the lack of use or maybe the extreme use, which is both amazing in different ways. One, if you get the extreme use, you can tell that there's more to build. If you get the lack of use, you'll immediately realize where you were gated. And so the beauty now I have is that liberty to empathize, which I've always had and it's always been in constant, but now I have the liberty to ship. And that has changed it for me. I now have tools that I can bootstrap and pull an app to life in a matter of days, deliver it back to the customer, put it in their hands and say, what do you think? And they interact with it, they play with it. And it's not something that I share on my screen. It's them opening up their screens, them sharing it, them logging in, playing with it and saying, this is great or it's not. Something I look for, especially in empathy, I look for the reactions. I don't look for just the words that they're sharing. I try to look for the in between that. And in between that is movements of mouses, dead clicks, the immediacy of a click, the reaction of accomplishing a workflow. And if you really look for those, if you really dig into those, you'll figure out if you have an amazing product that you're going to continue building on, or if you have something that needs to go back into the workshop. And I love that. That's the liberty I have now.
Man, it's, what I think about, even as you were saying it, is just like, we talk about empathy, we talk about even in the context of like certain emotional intelligence, like EQ, seeing how like just be interested and curious enough to sit with it, with people and their reactions, right? I feel like a lot of people are like more interested in what they want, what they think, and maybe that can get them somewhere. But I think at the end of the day, if you already don't know, to find that out is going to require the hard work of like emotional processing, being present, and how AI is making things easier on the building and on the, let's say, research and building side of things. I don't think it replaces the emotional labor. I think that authenticity of like showing up and being emotionally present and being curious and getting those reactions out of people, or seeing that, observing it, that's something that is, I think, a superpower. And I think like if people don't have that, I mean, they'll have a bunch of tools, but I frankly think they're just going to build the wrong thing faster, And so like, I, I think there's so much to be said about being a good builder should also mean like being also someone who's emotionally present, being able to like really, really sit with people and understand it, and not being able to translate through the tools like what we already know inside is like, I think, an incredible opportunity. So kind of talking about that shipping and execution piece, but I guess before I move there, do you think AI can replace empathy? Do you think that AI is something
Absolutely
that we can?
maybe I can say something that it absolutely could, but here I'll share the point is, why do I believe absolutely not? It's because AI is not building for AI. AI is building for humans, and humans are naturally very complex. We might want and desire something one week, and then want and desire something very different the following. And to predict that is quite hard, frankly, because that's what being human is. Cultural shifts, cultural norms, the way people interact with products and things and people and places are far just different around the entire world. So for some tools to just know that in and out and inherently and know the evolution of the human mind is, maybe there's a world that gets there, but I don't believe that, because I believe the whole point of becoming more efficient with your productivity, which is maybe a PRD or a PRFAQ doesn't take you hours to write. Maybe it takes you an hour. But the whole purpose of that is now you have hours to spend more time with the customer. I tell my team, your available hours is not to write more PRDs. That is actually not the point. Your available hours is to put back into spending more time with the customer, to really understand their interactions, how they work, how they tick, and where that industry is going. Become and believe exactly who they are, and you'll become a better product manager.
I love that. And to even extend those thoughts, like my personal stance on it, right? Because I think a lot of people are wondering right now, like, what can AI not do? Is, I think, a more frequent question at this point is like, before what AI can do? So because the idea is, I think, extending into this space where, what is the competitive advantage? If everyone has access to the tools, if everyone has the latest models, as everyone's able to build PRDs very quickly and now have an influx of time to ship more quickly as well, what is the true competitive advantage? And I do come back to this very human empathy EQ place, because I don't believe that would be automated. And I think it's a very hard thing, even now, even before AI, to do properly. And I think it's even harder and harder now of the digital age you're living in, to just really truly like sit with the feelings and the emotions and the lived reality. And the first principles to me is that these models are being trained on the data that is, the models will behave based on the data that it's been trained on. And that's a fundamental constraint. If they have not been trained on that data, then the AI will not know how to act on it, will not know what to do in situations that require that data. And I think that if you just look at the data it's been trained on from a public internet place, or even private data it's been trained on, but there's not enough data out there about how humans feel, and like even the lived experience of all of humanity, right? Whether you mention in a cultural context or an emotional context, in a very situational context, there's so much nuance to like human depth of feeling that like even the entirety of the internet cannot possibly encompass a significant enough portion of it. And so if you cannot simulate it, and the data is, for whatever reason, not been available to train on, then the AI simply will not know what to do with it. And that's why, I mean, you have to really force feed it a lot of that context, like as you were mentioning before, for it to even get somewhere there. But to the point of like, our role is being able to surface data in a way that like the AI, either one, does not have access to, and two, is not able to surface it themselves. And I think about that in the context of our jobs in product right now, having conversations with people, really feeling what they're feeling. And I think being able to really tease out the true essence of things, the true nature of what's going on in their lived experience, what are they really feeling, what are they really trying to do, will always be at a premium. And I think there will always be things to do. There will always be more and more problems to solve for humanity as they're doing whatever thing that they're doing. And our job is to solve real problems. And ultimately, if we cannot identify the real problem, it's just so much crap that's out there, quite frankly. And being a builder right now, I think is both easier than ever, but then also harder than ever, for the fact that like now everyone is building, everyone has insights, everyone has thoughts, right? And now it's all out there. How do you identify in this day and age the essence, the truth of like either the problem you're trying to solve or like a core insight? I'm wondering, like, are you feeling like a similar type of anxiety? And maybe there's a different way to frame it, but a similar level of like the bar has been raised like significantly in solving for things?
The bar is significantly raised, 100%. I mean, look at, I mean, I won't do like the age of the internet, but when you and I were first getting access to like the internet, like I think back to I'm dating myself here, but like the AOL days, like what was my expectation versus today? What's my expectation of the tools that are around me to help me accomplish things in my personal life and my professional one, or frankly, give me time to, take a break and relax. And I just had those like different expectations. But to get to the point of it, it's, when you're one as a human evolving or as like a civilization evolving, you still have a natural connection to other humans and to the services that they provide. So something you said is, if everyone has access to the same tools, like which one do you pick? And I think it comes down to customer service. I don't think that element of it goes away. Those who have empathy for you and those who are listening and those who are really trying to meet you where you are and where you need to be, and frankly, where you're planning to go, those are the ones that you align with. You almost look at them as extensions of yourself. Maybe folks might use the word vendor, but oftentimes those are partners. Those are partners that are supporting you in the direction that you'd like to take. So when I'm going through this, what I try to do is get very specific on a persona. And then I really pick that persona. I try to align with it. I think pitfalls that tend to happen is you generalize because you're simply trying to look for a large TAM. I think many startups are trying to showcase that they are attacking a very large TAM, and therefore they're going to be successful. And what you have to do to create,
I love the demographics
like,
that says 25 to 35. Like, okay, like, what does that mean? Like,
right.
Likes to eat cereal in the morning. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
So I'm just like
So
throwing
I think
arbitrary
that's the
personas.
truth of it. That's the truth. You've got to pick a group and you've got to become very good at it. I mean, you don't have to take the largest companies to see it. Take the smallest ones. The smallest ones that do so well, so successfully, is they take a pinpointed focus and then they become the absolute best. They gain some level of trust, not just from customers, but from the market, from their peers, from communities that are conferences that start to showcase them as a trusted leader. So then when a trusted leader decides to create the second version of their product, or maybe they try to extend their business into a different space of that industry, given that they were trusted in one, there's already a higher bar for that, or not a higher bar, but there's a lower degree of entry and a higher degree of trust. So I think it's very keen to always find a pinpointed persona and become really great at it. Get them to love you. And I think that's what goes back to customer service is you're there for them, you are reacting and interacting with them, you are listening and you are delivering. And you build that camaraderie, you build that trust, and then the word partnership starts to get formed. You are no longer a vendor, you are no longer a product, but you are now a partner. And you're a partner that's delivering a product. And I think that's what you have to be known as, especially in this space. Over time, when you start to deliver more, you're just seen as a product, as a partner that is now extending their arm. And that's really it. And so I think that's what I try to go back to, even in the business that we created back at Square, we were just for mom and pop merchants, those that were on vendors that were selling at, on Saturdays at the flea markets and other places. And we said, that's the group we want to go after. Now, when we started to go after larger merchants, it was an easy step forward. Easy in the sense that, yes, we had to build, of course, but there was this level of trust that made it easier, or frankly, simpler. How about that? So even when I look back to the smallest and the youngest startups, I think it's always about driving with customer service and being focused. You do that right and you do it the right way, and you're going to be able to win business, and then you can extend the TAM. But I think always trying to think that you're just getting this massive TAM and massive reach, I don't think investors are fooled by that anymore. And so I think you just cognizantly have to know that, look, we're going after a very valuable market of folks. Maybe they're not a big market, but we feel that if we nail that, it naturally extends us to the next one.
I feel like that's such a natural progression that a lot of founders end up stumbling into sometimes, but then sometimes it is a very intentional decision to be very narrow and focused. But man, is it difficult. It is so difficult not to try to, solve every problem. And so I think how do founders and, just builders in general, build the right thing? How do they, and I think you covered a few points, so I just want to reiterate, which was focus on something narrow niche, understood. But more than that, find someone that you can delight, truly make them ecstatic. I think if you could make one person truly just head over heels for you in terms of the services, it becomes so critical that they cannot imagine not having you. They would cry if you left. I think to reach that level, it's not something that gets built overnight. It's something that is built through trust and repeated delivery on important problems being addressed over time, right? And I think when you try to do that for too many people, I think you just dilute the overall delivery, and that distracts you, right? And I think about certain contracts that I have, which is right now 10 times larger than what it was even 2 years ago. And that's because there was just such an intense focus on it's not about the short-term delivery, it's about the long-term relationships. We're not here for a subscription. We're here to really just make sure that their success is our success. And I think it does get into even a good point of just one level deeper into how do you deliver world-class not just services, but the outcome of happiness in your customers. Is I feel the incentives of your product and service must be aligned with the value that the customers experience. And this is a point, a small point of just mindset, business models or product models. But the idea is that the product should be successful when the customer is successful, right? And what I've seen is a lot of times there being a disconnect. They're we'll do subscription-based pricing, but really the value that they're getting is only for a report or 2 reports. But we're shoving subscription down their price when they just need a report or 2, right? There's a lot of different angles for it, but I do think ultimately in terms of building the right thing, I think about also what is the forcing function. And what I've seen work well is basically build the product, but build it in such a way that it is growing relative to the value. And we call it you've probably heard of this term before, value metrics, right? Which is what is the value, what is the KPI of value, and being able to identify that and build around that and use that as the primary motivation of what to build and what to continue improving. So those are just different thoughts. But yeah, I think in terms of building, I think there's a lot of different angles here. Kind of any other thoughts about like how builders can be successful today, in terms of using all these technologies that are out there and otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, the whole purpose of this jump in productivity, the entire purpose is for delivery. And the purpose of a higher velocity of delivery is for the preservation of cash. If you spend a lot of time building, you have to think of the number of people building in your company times the number of days that they're spent building. Finally, you have this delivery date, and your intention of that delivery is that you can actually get paid for this. So at some point, there has to be some kind of input that is revenue for you. So all up until that point, it has just been an investment. So your intention is to squeeze that number down so that your investment is smaller, so you can get to the delivery that starts to earn revenue. The fear is as soon as you start to earn or you put it in market, perhaps it's not used, or maybe it's used wildly. There's no fear about that. That's the excitement. The fear is it's not used. So then what do? Do you go back into an investment, or do you pivot and start to build something else? I think, the reason that I said when you get hours of productivity back as a PM, your whole point is to make sure that where you're investing, you're trying your best to get to the next step from there. Because you said something really special, is that we're always going to be building. It's not like you build, you set it down and say, we're done, like we're wrapped up, wash your hands clean and walk away. I mean, the beauty of software is that you're consistently and always building, because you're trying to match the next level of expectation, because the expectation continues to evolve. So if you're building faster and you're delivering faster, your goal is to consistently spend time with the customer so that you can anticipate what is going to be part of that next release. Or you can anticipate if there is an upcoming pivot required and why that pivot happened and how to potentially avoid it again. Because it's not that a pivot is bad, but what it's saying, it's you have to go back into the lab and consider a brand new investment, or you have to peel a function off of your product and really invest in that. Now, that's not a bad outcome. Many successful companies have pivoted into something far greater, but I think you have to be looking for those signals. And with productivity, PMs and designers especially, PMs and designers especially need to invest that time to try to predict where that pitfall is going to happen. I think that's the true nature of it. And I'm not saying developers can't do it as well. Of course, a developer can extend him or herself to also look for that space. But if you've got that pod of product manager, designer, and engineer, which I'm not quite breaking up yet, but I have there's definitely a whole thought about that as well. I think you are spending your time to make sure that any investment you're making is turning into real valuable output.
Well, I think this is I feel like we can talk about this for hours, but I think this is just a good introduction to certain ideas about building and, particularly thinking about that pre-seed Series A plus type people who are, in the middle of building right now. I want to continue talking about like real experience, like real mindsets, real frameworks, but, I'm hoping to us to like go into some workflows soon too, and inviting other guests that are going to be talking about building as well, and what they've built and how they build and, the pivots that they've made. So I'm looking forward to continuing that conversation, man. So any last words before we kind of wrap it up and go off to the next one?
No, I'm ready to keep this engine going. I think we're going to get a lot of fun conversations, a lot of fun builders. We're going to share a lot of insightful things, both ups and downs. So really, really looking forward to those that we're going to bring on this podcast.